Most people think rich investors have secret loopholes, but they don't. They just use the tax code better than anyone else. Today, I'll show you exactly how high net worth people legally lower their taxes to near zero using real estate, depreciation, and debt. Those are the secret tools. And no, it's not shady. It's not even illegal. It's just plain smart. When you own income producing real estate, you're not just collecting rent checks. You're stacking up deductibles, interest paid, taxes owed, repairs, and the secret weapon that makes it all work, depreciation. See, depreciation is the overarching category, but what the IRS says is that if you pay interest on a loan, that's lost to you, so you can write off the interest paid. This is a tremendous deduction. You've got taxes that are owed, but you've taken this depreciation against taxes owed. You now have additional funds to invest that work like returns on an investment, because by making the investment, you're getting access to depreciation, allowing you to pay less in taxes and make more of the investment choices for your future. The other thing, if you've got a property that has a lot of repairs on them, that's not necessarily a bad thing, because if you're making repairs to a property, that goes directly against the income you would have received this year. Let's break it down. If your property makes $100,000, but you spend $75,000 on repairs of the property to get future rents that will be higher than today, the IRS is going to look at that and say that in the tax year 2025, you only made $25,000, thereby only paying taxes on $25,000. And then next year, when your rents are higher because of the repairs you made, you're going to be in a position to have a higher profitability, but you did that with the IRS's blessing to spend that money on your own property and improve it. So at the end of the day, you'll often find that smart investors buy properties that have lots of depreciation on the front, some repairs and or additional costs that happen in the second and the third year that allow them not to make money on the property for the first couple of years, because at the end, they have increased the value. And the reason that this is so important is because if you're taking depreciation and then you're taking interest paid and then you're taking taxes that you would have paid, but you've deferred through additional depreciation, and you've created an asset that was renting at $1,000 a door that's now renting at $1,500 a door, you've essentially increased the value of your property by 30%. And that happens at the sale. So now you're sitting there and you're able to buy the property. Let's say you bought it for $10 million. You're now selling it for $15 million because of what you did. But during the time that you've owned it, you've stacked in your tax benefits to make it look like you've made no money. But then when you do make money and you do sell the property for $15 million, you're able to use the beautiful thing called a 1031, which allows you to defer those taxes again by reinvesting in more real estate. So at the end of the day, you've made $5 million on the property and put that into the next property, still paying no taxes. This is what the rich do so incredibly well that allows them to continue to build wealth and leave the IRS sitting on the sidelines. I'll give you an example of a property that we had. We had built a multi-tenant industrial property, and we had an unsolicited offer that reached our 10-year goal. And it would have been awesome for my investors to be able to sell, achieve this phenomenal return, but then they were all going to get creamed with taxes. And so we found an additional investment that was very, very similar, but had a lot of upside to it because of what we could do to reposition that property. So when we sold the first property, we did a 1031 into the second property, allowing all of the profits from my investors to go into the second property. Then we did the same process all over again. We took depreciation right away. We put debt on it so that our $5 million in equity was just the down payment, creating debt, additional depreciation, additional improvements. And we repeated that process until now we are in a position where we are looking to do this same thing again and create phenomenal returns as we exit the property, giving everyone the ability to leave the IRS out of the equation. And a lot of times we use, well, not a lot of times, every single time we use cost segregation to achieve those high tax deductions through bonus depreciation and other things. And a cost segregation is really just an independent third-party study by qualified engineers that come in and really break down all of the essential elements in property. So the IRS says that landscaping only has a 15-year life. At the end of 15 years, the trees are growing through the sidewalk, the flower beds are overgrown. All of this stuff needs to be maintained and taken out and done again. So if we find a property, we're taking bonus depreciation on paint, on carpet. These are all 15-year items, and some of them are even 5-year items. Parking lots, landscaping, all of those kinds of things. And we're putting all of that and we're taking that as a one-time depreciation event that will offset a lot of the gain that is coming into the property so that we're not having to do the same thing again and again. To get the tax returns, we're able to recycle it through cost segregation and lower that tax bill so that we're not having to make $100,000, pay the IRS $35,000, and now with our 65 grand, try and create a return. We're using the whole $100,000 investment because we've offset the taxes in such a beautiful way that we don't have to repeat that process. Now, here's the thing. If you're owning single family homes, you can also do cost segregation studies. The problem with that is there's just not as much there to segregate. If you think about it, if you have a single family home, you don't have a large common area. You don't have a pool or a clubhouse or large parking lots. You have a simple driveway. And so your cost segregation is not going to be near as beneficial to you as it would be on a large scale apartment complex or an industrial park where you have a lot of these items that you're going to be able to depreciate. So if you can combine the purchase with large depreciation up front, refinance, receive those funds as a non-taxed event to go make another investment, and then 5 to 7 years down the road, sell the original property and do a 1031, you are doing all the things that the top 1% are doing to avoid paying taxes. And it's a void. It's not illegal. It's just following the tax code to make the best of the situation that is legally allowed to you to be the best investor. And that's really what it comes down to, is how smart are you with the money that the IRS is looking at to keep them out of it, to keep it growing, to keep it to the place where it now becomes cash flow and is giving you a better stream of income that then at that time, the IRS is going to get a piece, but you're able to offset for quite some time till you get there. You can scale your portfolio, pull equity tax-free, and push off your tax bill for decades, even through death, when you're able to get a step-up basis for those that inherit your real estate investments. So let me just be clear. There's a very distinct, it's not a fine line, it's not a gray area, it's a very distinct line between tax avoidance and tax evasion. Tax evasion will get you an orange jumpsuit, 3 meals a day, and a roommate named Bubba. But tax avoidance is where you use the IRS tax code legally to parlay your investment returns and grow them. And at some point, when the music stops and you stop doing 1031 exchanges, you stop doing depreciation, you stop with all debt on your properties, that is when taxes will be due. So there's always a time that the piper will be paid. It's just at what point is that, and what kind of nest egg have you built between the time you started and the time that that actually happens. You know, a lot of people think that transactions are what create real estate wealth, and that's not true at all. In fact, you'll very rarely find the rich flipping properties. In fact, if you go back through the whole cycle of how people get involved in real estate, a lot of people start by wholesaling. And wholesaling is simply where you make 100 calls to find a person who's wanting to sell a property that you get under contract, and then go find somebody else that can actually close on it, and you get a fee for doing that. Then people get into buying and fixing and flipping properties. And even that, there's not a tax avoidance strategy with that. There's not a way to parlay those returns. But where you see the top 1% really make money is by buying and refinancing and refinancing and refinancing that property and holding it for a decade or more. And when you can have that kind of patience in real estate, you will find that you will make far more money doing that than by doing the transaction, and you will be a lot less busy. And when you see a syndicator that isn't that busy because they're not always buying and then rehabbing and then reselling the property. They're holding properties. You're going to see somebody that is really making a lot of money for their investors. It's the slow, patient money that really builds into long-term generational wealth. So here's the thing. If you go back to the debate that Donald Trump had with Hillary Clinton was trying to tell everybody that Donald Trump didn't pay any taxes and he was a crook. And Donald Trump very wisely said, I use the same tax strategies that your donors use, Hillary. And this is the truth about what I see in the IRS tax code. See, the IRS can't, or the federal government as a whole cannot build buildings. They're not equipped to. They don't have the legal means to do so. They need to continue to incentivize investors and developers to do that work. They also, as members of Congress, as appointed people inside cabinets and boards and all this kind of stuff, these people are continuing to use these same tax strategies themselves. And so when you think about, will the IRS get rid of the 1031 exchange? It's been around for 70 years. It came out in 1954. It's not something they plan on eliminating anytime soon. And depreciation is an incredibly valuable strategy that they, as lawmakers, take advantage of. So in order for me to believe that at some point they are, as Congress, they as the federal government are going to eliminate these things, it would mean that I would have to believe that they were not interested in creating any wealth for themselves or their families or their friends, which is entirely impossible for my brain to fathom. And so I think that for the next 35 years, you're going to continue to see tax efficiency, tax breaks to do things that government can't do. And that is where you continue to see the best real estate advantages is by following the tax code and making sure that you're paying attention to that, just like members of Congress are, just like the 1% are. And if real estate isn't really your jam, maybe you should watch the video I put out where I spent $1.2 million to buy 4 airplanes and created the same kind of tax benefits and tax avoidance that created a $16,000 monthly revenue stream for me based on using the tax code to avoid that. That video is right below, and you can watch that video next. See, this is how the wealthy play the game, and you can too. If you want a deeper breakdown on tax savings deals, subscribe. If you want to talk strategy with your own portfolio, let's book a call. The link is below.